and everybody waits for the millennial pause, and here we are. Welcome to the stream, another impromptu TechTechPotato live stream with my trusty mug and my nice sign over here. The whole point of this stream is that it's been a year since I ventured out and to do things by myself, and this is kind of the update stream. Lots of Q&A going to go through. I've got a small kind of plan to go through in this video. So please, if you're watching the stream live, pop questions in and we'll go through them as they come in. If you would love a mug or a t-shirt with a potato on it, then I now have a merch store, merch.techtechpotato.com. Right now, there is a offer that you can get one of these, but with a square wafer, kind of like the Cerebrus one here. More potato, all caps, gets you 25% off those mugs. So quick plug for the merch. And welcome to everybody watching. Mark, Crispy, welcome. Bart, hello. And, double audio, great. It should all be working. If you hadn't guessed, this isn't my standard office. Right now, I'm in an Airbnb because I'm having some work done on the house, and I've had to bring all the stuff here, including graphics cards and funky bits. So yeah, it's going well. This is like week 6 out of 10 for the Airbnb. So having to live, it kind of feels like student accommodation, I guess. When you just start off at university and you have to go into like a shared house. This isn't a shared house, but yeah, it kind of had that feeling when we moved in. So let's start here, because this is a year to the day. I think it was technically the 17th or the 18th. And it's the 19th now. So yeah, just over a year since I left AnandTech. For those of you who are new to the channel, I was a journalist for 11 years at AnandTech.com and left a year ago to kind of do my own thing. Part of that being TechTechPotato channel, and the other part being More Than More, which is my analyst firm. So yeah, looking back on it, initial trepidations. I had been in that job for 11 years, 5 years as a freelancer, 5-6 years as a full-time salaried. And the biggest trepidation of venturing out into your own is, where's the money going to come from? So that was always a big worry. We got to a point, my wife and I, where we were thinking about doing a house extension. So it's appropriate that I'm in an Airbnb right now waiting for that. And we kind of said, look, we've got some savings, go try do your own thing. If it doesn't work, then we've got some savings and you can go do whatever to actually go make money if it doesn't work. Thankfully it has. And part of the helping on that, part of the sort of safety net I had was that before I actually made a decision, I went and I spoke to the head of analyst relations, essentially at AMD and Intel, within the space of about 3 days of each other. And both of them walked me through how they use their analysts and what they're looking for in analysts. And they both kind of turned around and said, well, if it doesn't work out, you can have a job here. And one of them said, we've got a perfect job for you, actually, that perhaps only you could do. So that kind of gave me the impetus to say, well, look, if it doesn't work, if 6-12 months down the line nothing's working, then that is a potential get out of jail free. And I guess I'm quite fortunate to be in the situation where I can turn around and just quit my job and try something else. A lot of people don't have that opportunity. And so I'm thankful for being in that sort of position where I could do that. The fact that we just bought a house a couple of years earlier and had a mortgage on that, which was more than our rent payments beforehand. Yeah, we had to make sure there was some sizable savings saved up in order just to make sure, just to pay the bills and such. And living in London yeah, they're not that cheap, but it has worked. It has worked. And hi to everybody else, everybody who's joining. PF100, Noah, Gustav, Amanda Klaus, Guido's here, fully buffered. Rogue, hey Rogue, everybody say hi to Rogue. And go check out Tech Deals. Go check out Fully Buffered as well. Robbie, Khalifa, Alexandre, Vignesh, Maxim, Eski, and Felix is here as well. So big crowd. But yeah, to continue where I was going on, I had a safety net, and that's kind of what helped me make the decision. It also helped that I had a few people in the industry who were saying, go be an analyst, you'll make more money as a journalist. And unfortunately, that's true. A good journalist pay is still above average pay. Though I was at a position where there was no launch pad, there was no career progression if I'd have stayed writing for AnandTech. And I'd kind of felt that already for a couple of years, especially as the team was getting smaller and smaller, and less significant in the eyes of the parent company. So yeah, I left and Andre left roughly at the same time. I think Andre was a couple of months before me, and he's doing well at Qualcomm. I'm doing well at my own thing, and it gave me a little bit of chance to reflect, because there's this adage that has been going on around in my head ever since I was thinking of this a year ago. And it's everybody has multiple careers in them, and they last roughly 7 years apiece. So if you have, say, 35 hours, 35 years of professional career in you from age 18 or however after university you have 35 years after that, that's essentially seven, no, that's my maths, 4 or 5 careers in you over that time. And it's kind of like that pick up, pivot, and go do something else. And I think officially, AnandTech is my first career, and then this more than more with TechTechPotato is now my second career. And that 7 years comes and goes around. You've heard of the 7-year itch in marriage, where marriages start to break down. It's kind of almost the same thing in careers. And then you also have midlife crises when you're in your second or third career. And you find out that people, when they stay in a job for a while, they either stay in it for something like 7 years or 14 years or 21 years. Always seems to be that sort of weird multiple. So that had me thinking. And then, again, a year on, if it hadn't have worked, I might be working for AMD or Intel or IBM or an AI startup. There's been a lot of weird interest when you say that you're no longer working with somebody. People come out of the woodwork to say, "Hey, come work for us." So that was interesting and gave me additional perspective, I think, into the sort of people who might be interested in my services as an analyst. So, and yep, hi again to everyone coming in. Good, audio is good. Okay, so I guess the next question is, are there any regrets leaving AnandTech? And to be honest, looking a year on, no. It's I think as AnandTech, as a team was getting smaller and I was doing more, it was burning me out. And being an analyst now, I can essentially schedule my time a lot better. That being said, I did do a lot of travel in Q4. And I'm covering roughly the same sort of stuff that I did at AnandTech, either internally with clients or externally on the channel. I'm doing a few more of the financial calls now. There are some companies that I have seemed to have completely lost contact with, who no longer want to contact with me, no longer want to interact in that way. ARM's the big example for that. And I really would like to have a relationship with them again, even though they're going through, this sort of what's going on right now. But then there are companies that I never thought I'd work with if I stayed at AnandTech. People like IBM Research, people like Tens Torrent, a lot of the AI companies that I'm now speaking to and either writing about or creating videos about. I don't think if I had stayed at AnandTech, there would have been the impetus to go down that route, because the impetus from the owner was essentially to drive, more commercial brand traffic. So it would have stayed into, say, CPU, GPU. I will say I haven't been able to spend as much time as before, I guess, testing the new CPUs and the GPUs. I know I've got some behind me. I've got. I never published a full AMD Zen 4 review. I did a stream. I never did a Raptor Lake review. I've got Sapphire Rapids and Genoa. And the workstation CPUs were launched. I'm already getting requests in to test those from system integrators as well. So that's going to be fun. But I'm able. It's the whole thing of go doing it yourself. No longer being your own boss means that you can manage your own time. That has positives and negatives. But I can time manage. I can content manage. I can do more of what I like, and I can help with my clients discussing, what I think from their portfolio makes sense to talk about. So, for example, I've got a couple of videos coming out soon with one of my clients, Tens Torrent. I've got an interview with Jim Keller, so that's fun. I actually interview him in person this time, and it got spicy before we even started talking. So there's that. And the second video from there is all about high performance RISC-V cores from the Tens Torrent perspective, because they've got a few things coming up with regards to high performance RISC-V, and everybody's asking, when does it come to laptop? When does it come to desktop? When does it come to server? And the answer's pretty darn soon. So yeah, things like that. That was great, because somebody I know went to work for Tens Torrent. We got on like a house on fire. I've helped them in the past with the companies they've worked in. They've brought me on. Jim obviously knows who I am, and Labija does, and that they're gathering a strong group of people over there. And I say that with the caveat that, yes, they are one of my paying clients. So there is that. But just generally, there's people there who are interesting to talk about. And I think you're going to see a few more of them on the channel as we sort of peel back these black boxes of these AI companies and find out exactly how they're going to do revenue and how passionate the people are underneath. So, and yeah, again, welcome to everybody who is joining. I can see Mr. Tiberium, Schmarvdog's here, Sean Bork, Grey Ridge, Juan Lebedev. Let's see, Max, Alan Shepherd, and maybe we've got some spammers as well. But yeah, it's. Any regrets leaving AnandTech? No, I don't think so. I mean, I miss working with Ryan and Gavin. When I was with AnandTech, obviously you find something interesting and you want to talk about it with somebody, you talk about it with people on staff. And I did that very often with Ryan and Gavin. And to a certain extent, if there's something I think they'll find interesting, I still do that. And I've seen Ryan multiple times at events. And yeah, it's they're still work colleagues. I still see them, and Gavin's based in the UK, but he's at the other end of the country, so I don't see him as often. Chances are, I know they have it, and there's some budget stuff right now. A lot of the big corporate press are debating about travel, so hopefully they'll get a chance to go to Computex, and I'll see them there. Taiwan. It seems weird to go speak to somebody at the other end of the UK. I have to go to Taiwan to go see them, but I'll be at Computex, and I hope they'll be there, and a bunch of the other people that are in the industry will probably be there. Though, yeah, YouTubers don't tend to like going to these big events like CES and Computex just because of the rigorous publishing schedule. But it is what it is. So. And so for a question here that I think is relevant, Leo Tolosky, will I be at LTX this year? LTX being the Linus Tech Expo. I have been officially invited. Colton emailed me a couple of weeks ago. I said, yeah, I filled in a form. We're going to sort out flights and travel. But yes, I should be there. So that'll be fun. I've not been to an LTX before. I have been to expos before. I've been to Comic-Con in London, and I don't know. It. I'll be listed as one of the creators traveling there, and that still feels a little bit weird to me. People will be like, who's this weird potato guy, right? So. Noitek asks, did you ask Jim Keller if the Royal Core project will be his last CPU client architecture work? Given that some of Ten's Torrent stuff mentions laptop and desktop, perhaps not. That being said, he's not necessarily on the RISC-V team, right? He's the CEO, he's not the chip designer. In the video I have with Ten's Torrent coming up, I've actually got the lead RISC-V architect that they have, who's a guy who was essentially lead architect at Apple during their M1 design. So that's going to be fun. Robbie Rob asks, do you plan to contact people that cover the field of relevance like you do, thinking of Asianometry? So John from Asianometry and I have said that if we get a chance to be in the same location at the same time, we will meet up and do something. He's based in Taiwan, so assuming he's still in Taiwan during Computex, I'll probably see him then. Whether he'll do a face reveal on camera, I don't know. But we may do something like a podcast, or maybe we can create some content together. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, John's definitely on the list of people for me to meet. So we'll see. And then yeah. So you should do a Rate My Tech Tips video with LTT when you are there. A Rate My Tech Tips. I don't know. We'll see. I've got some ideas of weird, stupid videos to do in general. Regarding if I plan to do any content around LTX, I don't know yet. I haven't really formed it in my brain, and part of that is because I've never been before. Sometimes with completely different shows, it's hard to think about what exactly you want to do the first time you're there. That's why whenever I go on location or a client has asked me to make a video about something, ideally I go to their place twice. Day one to have a look around and get a feel and get a sense and to digest and write a script, and then day two to actually film something. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what will happen. So yeah, so I know there's a couple more questions, but I'll motor on with this kind of little script of order of play that I have. So I want to go over what my business, what my offering kind of looks like today. Because for those who have seen my previous videos where I've spoken about exactly what I do, in the past I've said I wanted it to be kind of 80% of my work, of my time, of my revenue. I don't think I specified, but 80% was going to be on my Analyst business, more than more, and then 20% is on TechTechPotato, the channel. And to kind of clarify that, so I consider myself right now an analyst and an influencer, so analyst influencer. And as an analyst, my offering to companies is to essentially help them with their messaging, their marketing, their naming, helping them understand the industry, helping them understand external perspectives. And the thing you have to realize with these companies is they get so internalized with what they're working on, they sometimes forget what people externally know. And I liken this to video game quality assurance, which is funny because I was told of a story once of how during a game, during testing, one of the developers was so good, they were doing a boss fight, and he completed the boss fight very easy, no problem, and he just continued and said that's the level of difficulty we want. Turns out the guy beat the boss using a frame perfect trick that only somebody who's very well versed in playing the game, is able to do. And actually, the game came out and was really, really difficult for a casual player. So convert that into marketing messaging for some of these technical companies, especially some of the AI ones, or those who are doing esoteric things like machine learning, like quantum. There may be a video on analog at some point as well. I know I've got a rant about optical compute that I want to do at some point as well. So it's things like that. That's what I offer as an analyst to these companies. And I said that I wanted that to be 80% of my time, with TechTechPotato being about 20% of the time. However, it's turned out more in the sense of 50-50. And the reason is, part of my analyst offering is I have essentially internal versus external workloads. So as an analyst, I charge a yearly retainer or a quarterly retainer to these companies. And that provides me, I'm there for calls, for briefings, for analyst days, feedback sessions, what have you. And then external is all like the sponsored projects, like white paper videos, sponsored videos, and presentations and that sort of stuff. So I have clients who will have me on retainer, but then also have me doing extra external content with them, either producing it for their channels or producing it for my channel, as sponsored by them. So I've considered everything that's external content under TechTechPotato. That's why it's kind of 50-50 right now. You've seen content on the channel, sponsored content, that are from companies who are simply hiring me as an influencer and not under the analyst side. And then there are some companies that I've worked with on the analyst side and you haven't seen any sponsored content from them, from me, sponsored by them on the channel. So clients do lots of different mixes. And but with the channel itself, so the channel, we're at about 78,000 subscribers, and at the beginning of last year it was more about 60,000, so we're going up quite slowly. I know Anastasia in Tech, I think, has passed me already, because she's putting out some really well researched content, and because I guess I'm spending my time a bit more with clients doing the internal stuff rather than the external stuff. I'm also doing a few more of the esoteric topics, such as FPGAs, and full stack solutions, and how to name a supercomputer and that sort of stuff, or correcting things such as price fixing, for example, has meant that my output when I was in the AnandTech days on the channel has kind of slowed, and I'm sorry for that. Part of that is also, sometimes I get held up, whether it's storyboards, whether it's editing. One of my first things I really need to do here is perhaps hire a video editor to help. Though I'm in that dichotomy of, well, if I hire a video editor, isn't it faster if I do it myself? And Linus has actually spoken about this. He said hiring people means you have to take on the acceptance that the throughput won't be double if you hire somebody. So there is that. It's something I need to keep thinking about and at some point execute on, and not be an Airbnb to do that. But I think on the channel there's currently a healthy mix of sponsored and non-sponsored content. I want to ask you guys, what's your reception been to the sponsored content so far? If you've been watching my videos, then if we go through a video list, so I helped to name a supercomputer is sponsored, Lattice Avant was sponsored, Price Fixing by Undershipping wasn't sponsored, TSMC Financial Analysis wasn't sponsored, IBM 4 Pillars was sponsored, Intel Next Gen CPU and GPU wasn't sponsored, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 Tested was sponsored, my artsy AI Outclassing Humanity wasn't sponsored, AI Hardware Will Be Everywhere presentation wasn't sponsored, PC World Stuff wasn't sponsored, then IBM and Foundation Models was sponsored, ARM versus Qualcomm wasn't sponsored, Software versus Hardware Full Stack Solutions with IBM was sponsored. Cerebrus one wasn't sponsored. I think we're perhaps doing about 50-50 right now in terms of sponsored and unsponsored content. And yeah, the sponsored content does pay well and helps keep everything afloat. If it was purely done on view counts and in-roll ads, then the channel itself isn't sustainable in that front. What I am trying to do is, if it's a sponsored video, I won't put any ads in the middle of it, which I think is important. So there will be that dichotomy with those videos, and also those sponsored videos don't have an in-roll ad, added like a Linode ad or whatever. So I'm going to ask you guys, what is the reception to some of that sponsored content? Because some of it's performed really well, like the IBM Quantum video. Some of it hasn't performed as well as I'd hoped, like some of the interviews. Yeah, the IBM interviews, for example, with foundation models and full stack solutions, I thought were really interesting from a how do we understand the AI landscape. However, it seems that my audience wasn't necessarily interested in that. Maybe it's because you guys don't want to see other people on screen unless you know them already, like Jim Keller. So for those two videos with IBM, they were with Talia Gershon, who works at IBM, and she's really, really fun to talk to. Her and I got on like a house on fire when we were chatting. I've also interviewed Jamie Garcia, also at IBM, and she's a former chemist working on green chemistry and electrochemistry, and we got talking about that, and she's really fun. But that video didn't do so well. Is it topic? Is it presentation? Is it person? I don't know. I'm in this mix where I want these videos not just to be entertaining, but also helping people learn about stuff, even if it's stuff they're only tangentially interested in, just so people get a wider perspective. Unfortunately, that narrows down the audience all the while. So let's go back through chat. And is it Juan asks, are Ten's Torrent going to IPO? I haven't discussed what their future is on that, so let's see. Thoughts on Untether? Untether are actually sponsoring a project coming up, so I'll leave it at that. Salmaki asks, do you have an opinion on George Hotz and his endeavors? I've watched a few of his streams. They seemed a little punchy at times. I don't know. So Philosophy asks, are there still gym things left to come out of Zen chips? Probably not at this point. Just really, Mike Clark is really the one that's heading up the team. There's also Leslie Barnes and a few others I'm probably forgetting to mention. But there's a good core team there, I think. And so Zen 5 that hasn't come out, Mike was already dealing with that when Zen 2 came out. And now they're on sort of like Zen 8 internally. So yeah, they've still got a strong team there as well. Noitech says, I still refer to you as a tech communicator. Yeah, on my LinkedIn, I'm listed as host because, yeah, influencer still has very negative connotations, especially in that front. I mean, science communicator also, well, what does that mean? Yeah, it's hard to kind of throw something at the dartboard. So Felix says Silicon Photonics as waveguides for AI inference is really interesting as a field. It is. I don't think it will work, but that's me. I travel a lot. Stasi. hey, Anastasia, how's it going? Yeah. Intel AMD sponsor content is fine. They're effectively product briefings. I noticed Qualcomm is a sponsor of Mercedes in F1. Yeah, they went to Ferrari for a year, didn't they? Then with Snapdragon, then they came back. AMD and Qualcomm are both sponsoring Mercedes this year, so fingers crossed we get a press tour of the Mercedes Formula One headquarters. So, when are we going to get more details about AI inference cards? They're coming. There's some interesting stuff coming out on the Jim Keller interview, which I'm gonna not tell you about until we get there. So, hi, Arik. The sponsor, Alan says, the sponsor mix seems good as you're honest and the sponsor seems to get you behind the scenes. Just keep it real. So I will say that some of the sponsored content that's been coming out is from companies who haven't necessarily sponsored any content before, or at least not sponsored any video. So I have to kind of help them along of what the concept of video is, how to read the analytics, what you get out of it, and what level of detail. Because sometimes they'll say, yeah, we want to sponsor a 10-minute video, and they'll request 25 minutes of information to be put in there, of which none of it is interesting unless you actually spend 7 minutes setting it up. So I do tell clients, look, if you're going for a 10-minute video on a concept that nobody's heard of before, especially, then 75% of the video is going to be introducing the topic, and then the next 25% is going to be introducing the topic in the context of the sponsor's product. And most of them are receptive to that kind of level of explanation. It's, if you've got a CPU or a GPU, you kind of don't need 7 minutes. You only need a couple to get, or even less, to get up to speed. But with some of this more esoteric stuff, especially AI, especially quantized low precision AI, you need to set it up in the beginning. Even Wi-Fi 7, for example, I did a sponsored interview with MediaTek, and I told them that interview is going to be 75%. Let's describe what Wi-Fi 7 is. And then the last 25% is, well, what's special about MediaTek solution? That sort of sponsored content. So it's Mark says some of the interviews are too high level. I think the audience wants more technical stuff. Yeah, it's because we're introducing topics on the channel for the first time, right? And to be honest, one interview I did with Talia, for example, we actually recorded it once and I went back and the video was unusable. And it just so happened that we were both free the next day, so I recorded it again. And in that time, my brain had actually worked out a lot of what she was talking about. So I was able to ask the questions in a different way that would have helped me understand if it had been said that way in the first place. Now, that's nothing on Talia. She was perfectly great. That was just me being slow in the uptake there. So just keep the sponsored content good visible. The label, yep, that's if you look in the description of all my videos, there'll be a list of all my every company that I've ever taken money from to do work for, either as an analyst or as an influencer in that, and that's going to be consistent throughout all my content. So let's see. FPGA content was great. Source said is asking a very long, detailed question about Intel and the future. There could be a whole video on that, so I won't address it right now. Intel will switch to ARM to compete with Apple. No, I doubt it. What's the next challenge for litho? Until when is EUV sufficient? At least, so it looks like most. So I've got a video talking about 0.2 nanometer process nodes for, crappy name, but whatever, which goes through IMEX roadmap, and that goes out to 2036, and litho is going to be good all the way out till then. So there is that. And what architecture is Jim most responsible for at Intel? To be honest, I don't think he's responsible for any architecture. He's more responsible for getting things to work in simulation and tools. So and he won't be able to talk about that for at least another 2-3 years. So we have to see. Juan asks, can Amazon and Google vertically integrate and display some video for AI training and inference? Are the Amazon/Google tensor processors competitive with NVIDIA? Go check out Dylan Patel's cost analysis of ChatGPT for search. And he'll showcase that if Google wanted to implement ChatGPT on its search, with GPUs, it would take about 1 million GPUs, and that's not sustainable. So it has to be run on the equivalent of TPUs. So that's interesting. Sal Miyake asks, can you explain better your service regarding white papers? So yeah, this is so one of the traditional analyst offerings, because there are many analysts in the field, is the concept of a white paper. And a white paper is typically 6 to 8 pages, dual column, like a research paper, about a particular product or service or what have you, where the idea is to go into sort of technical detail about how it works, perhaps some of the benchmark numbers, and why it exists. These things, like I say, 6 to 8 pages usually. AMD commissioned a bunch when Epic first launched with Zen 1, for example, because I know they commissioned Linley Group and Tirius Research to do a couple of those. And, if you remember the whole debacle about Principal Technologies and Gamers Nexus and that research there, that was essentially a testing white paper. That wasn't a white paper for technical purposes, that was a white paper for testing analysis. And what I've done now with the Lattice video is offer the industry white paper videos, say the same context, but in a video format, with the argument being that a lot of people now are consuming video to learn, not just to entertain. Especially the younger generation of engineers, they're now learning in a very multimedia way. And nobody in the analyst space who are doing white papers are doing white paper video concepts. So I've been offering white paper videos to my clients now since I started. It was part of my initial, what we call statement of work. And Lattice were the first company who came along and said, yeah, that sounds like a really good thing for us, especially with their new product family that they were introducing, Lattice Avant. It's a really big step for the company, so I know they had a lot of work going on with other analysts that they work with. So while they're not a client on retainer, they did come out and say, we would like you to do a white paper video. 25 minutes, that's... I'm considering 6 to 8 pages of written is about 25 minutes, though I think my script went to far more pages than that in the end. And I really enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed learning in detail more about the product than I would have done normally. Obviously, I work with a client in that case to make sure that it's both accurate, and with video also, it gives me a chance to speak about the rest of the industry, the competitive comparison, who in the market is competing, and what the customers are like. And that's something that white papers don't tend to go into. White papers are very straight-laned, very narrow. And from my perspective, they're what's called second-party content. So first party is made by the manufacturer. Third party is essentially fully independent, but based on information given to them by the manufacturer. Second party is still work produced externally, but paid for by the manufacturer. So white papers don't tend to be critical in that way. They're just designed to be informative. And with the video concept, it allows me to be informative both on a technical level and on a business level and on a market level. And that video went back and forth for edits, I think 2 or 3 times, but really enjoyable. And thanks to the PC World guys for letting me crash their studio to film that and a few other videos. That was really cool because Adam's got a lot of kit there and the quality came out really, really nice, and I really enjoyed that. So that's what a white paper is, and my concept of a white paper video is what I'm offering to my clients now. Let's see. Sebastian asks, can you explain a bit more about design rules that foundries have for their customers? How do they look? That's again a long question for a long video. It essentially rules, right? Just rules. Though the channel is a technical and scientific one, it's also a personal one. The reason why Jim K's interview did well is because it contacts the person and thinking, not just the news of it. Yeah, the first Jim Keller interview was very unique because because Jim's been interviewed extensively in the past by people like Lex. He was able to talk to that, and he's very good at coalescing his ideas. That being said, in the interview I had with him, he did repeat a few things that I'll have to cut out because that was in the previous interview. But a few of his points of view have also moved on as well. So that's going to be interesting to compare. Atta, thank you for the 50 Swedish krona. Appreciate it with all the potatoes. Yeah, favorite Eski says favorite video is definitely the Jim Keller interview. Yeah, I think that's on about 50k now. 56k. Phoenix asks, why aren't there ARM CPUs and motherboards in the open? There are. Is it 96boards.org sell a bunch? It's SBCs, Raspberry Pi. Yeah, it's not socketed because the volume isn't there in the same way, I think. Nobody's building chipsets for ARM CPUs because most ARM CPUs are SoCs if they're of their own right. Mark, thank you for the 5 Canadian. Again, appreciate it. I actually need a refill. In true craft computing style, I'm drinking some naturally sugar-free Nextbar kombucha, live sparkling cultures, elderflower and lemon, Australian made and owned. Though I believe it's made locally, just by an Australian, Australian. So I don't necessarily drink that much, but I will have a kombucha every now and again. For those of you who missed the beginning, and you want to pick up one of these ridiculous mugs, then head on over to merch.techtechpotato.com. There is a link in the video description, and if you use the code MOREPOTATO, all in caps, no spaces, you'll get 25% off the new special edition Cerebrus edition mugs with a square wafer. So, and if you're wondering what a square wafer looks like, it's that. We'll get to that in a bit. Marvia asks, will Tachyon sponsor you for their groundbreaking Prodigy processors? I haven't spoken to Tachyon since we did that interview with them and the Chips and Cheese guys. So it's interesting that. The Paradoxy asks, on Discord, where do I post questions for the stream? There should be a Q&A channel, Q&A questions only in the Discord. And Zavid says, do you really have a PhD? Yes, I have a whole stream on it, 2.5 hours. You can watch me defend my thesis on stream. Photography asks, how is TSMC doing with direct water cooling, where the water channels were etched directly into the silicon layer on top of the CPU? I haven't seen anything new. However, ISSCC, International Solid State Circuits Conference, is over the next few days. Unfortunately, I'm not there. There may be something there, I don't think. Dave asks, have there been any developments with the lowest spec benchmark challenge with Gordon from PC World? I have hardware. But as I mentioned at the top of the stream, I'm not at home right now. And so a lot of that stuff's on hold until I get home. Like my Genoa review, because my server's back at home. Future for ray tracing, it will just be one of those one button click things until ray tracing can effectively do 60 fps 1080p on its own. What about that Xeon in the background? So yeah, just here you've got a Genoa, and just there you've got Sapphire Rapids. So AMD and Intel and a couple of others could be as well are now in a competition to see every time they launch a new product, they send the press and partners out dead samples of it in Lucite. AMD did this with the original Threadripper, and there's been a few since, but now we've got it Genoa and Sapphire Rapids. So, yeah, I've got a few. I think I got one for 11th gen from Intel. Some of them are numbered, but it they're fun to have, but they do stack up eventually. So yeah. Yeah, people asking product stuff. Did ChatGPT replace me at AnandTech? As far as I know, no. So let's go on to the next stage of so yeah, as explaining more about what I do, and I think I went through a lot about the more side. Analyst firm. Technically, I formed it in mid-March, even though I left AnandTech in mid-February. So it's about another month from there. But because I announced it with the video, I did a video about what's my future, and that's where Linus and I had a joke going on that I was going to go join him at Labs. He employed Gary Key in the end, who used to have my job at AnandTech anyway. So what goes around comes around. But I formed the company more in mid-March, and the first clients came on board, I think, about May, June. IBM was the first, and really thankful for them, because they reached out of the blue and said, "Look, our engineers love what you do and would love to work with you. So here's some money to work with us." And I'm like, awesome. And from that, I did that quantum video that went viral. I think is that almost at 500,000 views now. And then also through that, met lots of really smart people. I've presented at their AI conference. I'm actually going to go see some Z Systems soon. We're actually sorting that trip out now, so that's going to be fun. I've also met with the lead architect for Z, Christian Jacobi. He's a fun guy to speak to. He loved my videos. The comment he gave me is, "My wife watched your video and finally understands what I've been working on the last 5 years." And that's the sort of content I want to make. So it's fun that. So the clients that I've got now on retainer, for full transparency, IBM, AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, and Tens Torrent. Some of them are very new. And then I've got another kind of a dozen companies that have paid for sponsored videos, some of which have come out, some of which have yet to come out, that I still need to work on. And I've got to apologize to some of them, because some of them we engaged back in October, and I still need to finish those. But yeah, this retainer model and influence model, some clients go for the retainer, some clients go for the influencer, some go for both. And it's working. It means I don't have to put all my eggs in one basket. It means I don't have to go gung-ho on the YouTube stuff. It doesn't mean I need to go gung-ho on the Analyst stuff. Talk about millennials having a main job and a side hustle. It's all in one at this point. It's just, I use TechTechPotato for a lot of the fun stuff, and more than more is kind of the the more formal name for it all, and that's what I incorporate in my company as. So so lots of clients. I did a lot of traveling in Q4. Part of that was product, part of that was presentation stuff. I recently visited a potential client in San Francisco. Unfortunately, I can't get to their next event, but that's really fun. That's in optical networking. It's been fun. Also always looking to expand, more clients, more opportunities, get the ball rolling, and again, like I said earlier, hire somebody to help with the editing of the videos. Key highlights, aside from obviously interview with Jim, I did that video recently where I helped name a supercomputer. That's been fun. Just presenting in front of an audience as well. now. I've done it twice. I've got 2 more coming up. So if you happen to be at DAC, Design Automation Conference, I'm doing one of the keynotes there. I've got an interesting project coming up that's going to be a multi-episodic project. Could talk about that in a bit. And getting things like that. And one thing I also have to say about everything I've done so far is that all my traffic is genuine, and I'm dealing with a lot of clients who are new to video, and new in the sense of they may have invested something in video before with analysts and not quite, and getting them up to speed on what the metrics mean, how to spot fake views, how to spot fake subscribers. A lot of them, when I show them data for the first time, looks shocked and surprised, especially if they've already spent money on people who are doing that. So it really is this interesting mix. Because other analysts who do video, I don't see many of them declaring any of it sponsored, whether it's FTC guidelines or UK Ofcom guidelines, that sort of thing. It really gets into this weird mess. And this side. So what I want to do going forward, especially, is make sure that everything's clear. You guys know when stuff is sponsored and when it's not. And, the goal is that I will never take a sponsored content job that doesn't fit the channel, that doesn't make sense. That if I don't find it interesting, then I don't think you guys would. Then again, I find a lot interesting, and it's clear from the views that most of the audience don't find some of that interesting, but maybe it's the sort of stuff you have to be there. And on top of all the analyst stuff, I do have a newsletter. It's a More Than More Substack. So if you go to more-more.com, that's more-moore.com, you'll go to my newsletter, which is kind of like a mini blog. There, I've been focusing more on the financial side of stuff. But I've also done things like the Dojo Deep Dive. There was a written version there. And it's more for discussion and opinionity type stuff. And I'm not posting to it as often as perhaps I should. But part of that is because I'm so used to doing the news cycle that I was as a journalist, that I don't want the blog to just devolve into news without analysis. So for me, it's important for that to be a blog where there's financial stuff and opinion stuff. So that, excuse me, talking a lot. That's really important to me. And then, so More Than More, TechTechPotato. The only other thing that I do, which I mentioned on videos before, is that I also take consultancy calls with Wall Street investment firms. So, can't say any information that's under NDA, but they'll ask me questions about the business, the market, the technology, the competitiveness, because they may take that information to do stuff with their investments, and they're looking for somebody who's spent 50, 100 hours doing the research to condense it into 1 hour of having a chat and answering questions. So I have some regular business there now, a couple of calls a quarter, and then odd ones, and that's through places like if you're familiar with them, GuidePoint, GLG, Third Bridge, and a few custom clients. I know Dylan Patel at Semi-Analysis, he has kind of like a meeting box where you can book a meeting with him on Substack. I may do that potentially as well, so we'll see that. And then, often I ask myself, are my clients happy? Are they getting their money's worth? And to a certain extent, if I'm 100% busy and can't take on any extra work, then perhaps I'm undercharging. But like I said, repeat financial calls. IBM loved the quantum video that kind of went viral because it was posted at the right time. Lattice white paper seems to have done really well for a white paper, because you have to imagine that typical white papers may only be seen by 100 to 1,000 people in their lifetime. And that video is, creeping up to 10K and will probably be there in a couple of days as well. So the fact that 10,000 people have seen at least parts of that video is actually really impressive. And the number of hours viewed for that video is actually above average for the channel, even if the views are just around about average. So really pleased with that. And yeah, I've got clients who are renewing or finding new projects to do with me, or just going through the retainer funds very, very quickly. So that's good to hear. It's clear that they want my input. It's clear that they want extra content out, sponsored content out, under my stipulations of it has to be important for the audience, has to be interesting for the audience. So yeah, I think I'm offering something that other analysts aren't. And it seems to be resonating with a number of people. It's not resonating with them all. It's not. It depends. It depends on the PR agency. It depends on the company. It depends on growth. But any time that's not filled in with client stuff, I fill it in with just regular videos that I want to make, and it's been going really well. And I hope you've been enjoying as you've been following along. So yeah, let's go back to chat. And have you played around with any of the, so Ziv Zulander asks, have you played around with any of the RISC-V small board computers? I have the Sci-5 Unmatched. It's still in its box, and I know there's somebody on my Discord who keeps telling me send it to him, and he'll play with it if I'm not going to do it. Felix asks, with Titanium being mostly killed off, perhaps a look into VLIW processors. So, I mean, in terms of AI, there are some AI chips that do VLIW-like integration where it's all done on the compiler level. But there's not that many about anymore. Solid React asks, could we get a video demonstration of how like TensorTorrent cards work compared to GPU cards? As a one-person AI researcher, I would love to learn if TensorTorrent is something for me. So there will be information in the interview with Jim Keller that you'll be interested in, though we're not as close to doing that sort of thing in the way that I think you're thinking of yet. But there'll be some more information coming. Quantum Infinity, thank you for the couple of bucks. Thanks to you, I want to buy every wafer I see. You do get some weird looks when you ask. Can you cover an ASICs company like you did with the FPGA company? It was your best video. Gags, thanks for the comment. Yeah, I mean that's like I say, that's a sponsored white paper video. So if any ASIC company wants to have that sort of content out that they can refer to, that they can use on their website, that they can use in presentations, what have you, reach out. My email's in the About page on the YouTube channel. So looking forward to a video about design rules. That and dark silicon are still a bit of a mystery to me. Yeah, dark silicon's gone in and out of fashion as a term. Ernesto asks, do you know if the new 24 gig and 48 gig RAM sticks will work on AMD? I believe they're not work probably, approved as in QA'd, POR, plan of record, tested and validated. Maybe not this chipset, maybe next. We're getting to lots of product questions now. Philtography asks, can you use the HBM on Sapphire Rapids as your only system memory? Yes. You can have DRAM-less Sapphire Rapids with HBM. Salmiaki asks, has Sapphire Rapids Workstation Xeons actually launched? Yes, they launched on the 15th. SKU lists are out. Recommended consumer pricing is out. Only a few of those CPUs will actually be boxed. And motherboard prices are who knows right now. They went a bit weird with some of them having 4 channels, other than having 8 channels. That's going to be a bit confusing on the motherboard side. And I actually just saw Linus's WAN show earlier today, where he spoke about a $400 Sapphire Rapids workstation CPU. that CPU is OEM only. You're not going to buy a boxed version of that. So, yeah. Let's see. Have you heard Jim Keller's company is using ChatGPT to generate large amounts of code, accelerating their roadmap? Yes, that's a topic in the interview that I'm going to publish. Hopefully publish in next week. I need to get a draft back to them on that, because that's also sponsored content. Meltdown Spectre asks, TDP will continue to rise as we near the limits of silicon, won't it? I think right now we're just at the limits of cooling. Thermal density versus cooling. So Liquid R says, still disappointed you didn't take over AnandTech and rename it AnandTech. I didn't want to buy it. Nobody was selling. So Ziv Zulander asks, were you the one solely responsible for the bench section of AnandTech CPU reviews? Yes, I was. That was me. I have an automated test suite. I still do. I haven't updated it in a while, though. And the idea was just to process it through it and get as much data as possible. I wanted to commercialize it. There wasn't any impetus internally to do that. And it, yeah, slowly has died. So, and the Paradoxy asks, will you be testing AVX512 for the new Xeons? For the 5950X3D, you mean 7950X3D. Any chance you're willing to do some testing of these CPUs with the number JIT pilot for Python? You have to email me with a specific use case. I already have AVX512 code, both my own and stuff like YCruncher, but everybody uses that. If you've got a specific benchmark in mind, you have to let me know, and you kind of have to give me explain it like M5 way to run it. So there is that. ELS asks, any optical chips exposure? I've seen Light Matters Passage, which is interconnect. I haven't seen optical chips. I've seen some analog test chips, but let's see. Just keep going. Sebastian asks, will you attend the Embedded World conference in March? So I've been invited by like 5 companies, but I can't make it. Top of the video, I mentioned that I'm in an Airbnb because currently going through a house extension build, and Embedded World happens to be week 9 out of 10 officially on the build. And if you've ever had any building work done, especially things like new kitchens and new bathrooms, you have to be there in the last couple of weeks to make sure everything goes to plan. And I unfortunately really can't spend the time away. I've been invited to Embedded World. There's a conference in San Francisco I'm invited to at the same time. I think there's something in New York as well at the same time I've been invited to. And it's just that week I can't do anything. And that's when everybody's decided to do stuff. So, thanks, Ziv, about the newsletter. And thank you, Fractal. Paradoxy, thank you for the $5. All your content is interesting. Please don't hold back on doing the type of content you enjoy. Part of it is time and workflow. Lately, I'm not sure whether it's because I am in an Airbnb. I've been finding it very difficult just to get started in the mornings, but there we are. It's this is live. I thought this was a podcast. Well, it happens. It happens. Isn't the current scope an array of products offered by silicon manufacturers driving up the cost of everything? Anathema to the original affordable IBM home computing model. I mean, go back, I know, to the 90s and how much was personal computing then. You're paying $3,000 for a system that would now be about $6,000 in today's money. Excuse me. That had a 10 megabyte hard drive or something. So I think we're still on a good path. As we get to denser process nodes, we're going to have to be smarter in how we're designing compute, I think. And OLB Tube, hope you have fun. He has to go, but thinks the channel is informative. Patrick Aubrey asks, outdated rhetoric question. How many NVIDIA Tesla cards does it take to match a small supercomputer? If you go to the top 500, I think NVIDIA has several of the top 10, and one of them is based in NVIDIA. So there is that. Hey, Scarl, how's it going? Felix says Sapphire Rapids workstation soft launch. Motherboards are strange. Don't expect much. Yeah. So the last workstation, I probably should do a proper video on the workstation stuff. But in the past, high-end desktop and workstation were kind of the same thing. A Venn diagram where both circles overlapped very much. Now we're in a situation where they're being separated. High-end desktop and workstation are now being very separate. And typically in the workstation market, it was a very OEM-driven model. You'd have server-like motherboards and server-like CPUs, whereas in the high-end desktop, you would have consumer-focused motherboards and consumer-focused CPUs. Because workstation is towards the OEM, the motherboard side of everything means that, well, I think it looks like we're going to get 2 from Asus. We'll probably get 1 from Gigabyte, maybe 1 from ASRock. And they'll probably start at about $800, even for the $400 workstation chip. And they'll all be built for the 8-channel versions. That's the W3400, not the W2400. And if you put a W2400 in, it'll probably work, but you have to make sure you put the memory in the right locations. They're DDR5 RDIMMs, but they're RDIMMs only. You can't put UDIMMs in these because with DDR5, RDIMMs and UDIMMs now can't be in the same slots. There's different routing for both. So you're limited to RDIMMs only, which again puts up the cost for these platforms. So even the cheapest workstation platform isn't going to be cheap. And honestly, the way to think about a lot of this is kind of like AMD's Threadripper Pro. Most of that is also OEM only. You can only buy pre-built systems, and that's kind of how Intel's workstation is going to be sold. But we'll see. I've got one system integrator that's offering me a system. I've got one of the motherboard vendors offering me a chip and a board. And I may also have a dual socket version, but the dual socket technically is the server CPUs, not the workstation CPUs. And there are some differences with the workstation CPUs. Sapphire Rapids introduced a lot of accelerators, and only one accelerator is active on, and only one version of that accelerator is active on the workstation CPUs, and other things like that to think about. So, Janos, what specific things will we be looking at during the house build? As in aspects, well, just make sure it looks good and we've got the power sockets in the right locations and the lights are good. And if anybody's ever installed a new kitchen before, making sure that the kitchen cabinets actually work and you don't the thing to avoid is extra expenses, right? And I think right now everything that we budgeted for, we're about 5% extra expenses right now. And that's for things like, oh, this has come up. Do you want, extra insulation in your ceiling and things like that? Or the original plans were to go down to 1.2 meters for the foundations, and we've had to go down to 2 meters. Then there's an extra cost on the concrete need to be used, that sort of thing. So it's Patrick Harrison asks, do you know when Xeon Workstation CPUs will have HBM? I have asked this to multiple people, and the answer is there is no plan to do it. They haven't seen any demand. And yet, every time I bring it up, the question everybody asks is, when are there going to be Xeon Workstation CPUs with HBM? Now, these are what's called the Max CPUs, Sapphire Rapids with HBM. Intel is only selling them to the HPC community, and so there won't be any workstation versions. And like I say, they haven't had any demand for the workstation market to have it. There's also a few other use cases where it may not be applicable because HBM is also very power hungry. So your idle power is going to be really high. there's that to think about, especially when it's storing data. So you may not. I heard something about sleep states maybe are different with the HBM SKUs. Maybe I got that wrong. But it's not as simple as just saying to the firmware enable HBM SKUs. There's a lot of extra stuff that has to go on and enable. And yeah, if that sleep state is true, they may not be able to pass for energy certification or something like that. It's really weird. So it's a lot more many more hurdles than standard. Whereas if it's a server part that gets put into a rack, then it's the only way really to get a workstation like environment with the CPU Max with HBM is for somebody like Supermicro to put a server motherboard with 2 HBM SKUs in and sell it as a workstation. So there's that. Photography asks, are Fujitsu making an update to the A64FX? Probably. I haven't stayed on top of Fujitsu recently. Janos asks, deep learning based AI research is now out of reach of most small-time researchers. Do you think this will change anytime soon? I think the way machine learning is changing is instead of everybody creating really large models, everybody will take large, what they call foundation models, which are already pre-trained, and then do, last couple of layer fine tuning. It's like with Stable Diffusion. You can do fine tuning on your own face, and it will start to recognize your own face. So a lot of AI, if you're not dealing with large foundation models like that, you'll probably be doing with fine tuning foundation models. So we'll get a very distinct, separation between the two. Rohit asks, do you believe Rockham will ever be able to compete with CUDA and gain developers, or is the inertia behind CUDA too hard to overcome? So CUDA's been going on for 10 plus years longer than Rockham, and it's ingrained into universities. There are university schemes to study CUDA. Rockham, OpenCL, not so much. And yet you have to remember, NVIDIA has 10 times as many people working on GPUs than AMD has, right? So size of the company in terms of number of people, NVIDIA is 10 times more on GPUs because NVIDIA is only focusing on GPUs and the Mellanox stuff. AMD's, CPUs, GPUs, FPGAs, Pensando, all of it now. So the only thing that's going to dislodge CUDA significantly from that space is if machine learning libraries just become ubiquitous. So, for example, everybody uses PyTorch, and you just compile PyTorch to whatever hardware you have, and you don't touch a line of CUDA. So you use Python to program PyTorch. That's what will dislodge. And machine learning is probably the best case to do that. So Hame Spada, thanks for the Aussie $5. What are your thoughts on racetrack memory? I watched a recent talk by Stuart Parkin, and he suggested that all the research is basically done and the manufacturers just need to make it. I've not heard of racetrack memory. So sorry, I have no input there. I've not heard of that. Patrick Aubrey asks, is Intel going to be in workstations? Would they make their own motherboard again? Nope, no plans to. And Databang says, Asianometry cited me in one of his videos. Yeah. So sometimes I wish he would, if he was going to cite me, if John could reach out to me. Because there are so often many times I see one of his videos and I'm like, oh, I could have had something that you could have put in there that would have made it 5% better. But we all do our own thing. There's always, everybody has a case of everybody can learn 5% more about their specialist subject. So from a dev standpoint, Rockham is miserable to use. Having been lied to by multiple AMD engineers, I've moved to Sickle. So the danger there is that a purposeful lie? Is that a lie dictated by management, or is that just a lie because they themselves didn't understand what was going on? I found that in a lot of these big organizations, what the quote unquote marketing message is versus what the engineers see things to be versus what they actually are three different things. And it's only somebody looking from outside can actually pinpoint it together. And the annoying thing is, if you're right in the middle of that, what may come across as, again, outright lies might just simply be incompetence and bad internal communication. So, yeah. Lele Socho asks, I remember towards the 40nm era, the cost per transistor stopped going down. Is this partly because of new cutting edge products being much higher than, say, 10 years ago? It's just a case of what's needed to create them is gotten vastly more expensive. And then therefore the cost has gone up. And we're not scaling itself has gone down while cost has remained going up. So density, transistor density is a difficult metric to quantify, because are you talking about logic? Are you talking about SRAM? Are you talking about flip-flops? Are you talking about high density libraries? Are you talking about low density libraries? What configuration are you using them in? TSMC 3nm has this FinFlex stuff, which is a bunch of additional tools to help you get efficiency or frequency out of the transistors. It's gets very complex. Alan asks, if you can answer the split between workstation OEM and versus high-end desktop, a technical or a market share protection, or workstation just doesn't have volume. So I was led to believe that the high-end desktop / workstation market back in the day was only about $1 billion in revenue for the whole market. And obviously today it's much less than. So it's kind of like it requires a lot of non-repeating engineering, NRE cost to develop that platform, and then you have to support it for a long time. And then if it turns out the sales aren't there, you have to obviously match the cost with what you think the volume is going to be. Make sure you don't pinch out any of your existing product lines, that sort of thing. It's, for example, in a workstation you want to support lots of memory, whereas in high-end desktop you only need to support medium amounts of memory. The NRE cost to do high amounts of memory with, say, 8 channels of DDR5 at 2 DIMMs per channel is a lot, because the timing requirements on to enable something like that is very strict, and therefore you have to be very exact with your yields. And so for example, if you have a wafer of CPUs, if you yielded them to W2400 specs, you may have a very good yield. If you yielded them to W3400 specs, you may not. So there's that to consider as well. Patrick says, what's the principle behind high bandwidth memory? Just lots more bandwidth, and it's very expensive by comparison. The Tech Boy Tech News and Reviews says, thoughts on the S23 Ultra. I am still blacklisted by Samsung. And it's funny because I was actually in San Francisco during the S23 launch. I didn't get an invite. Nobody reached out to me. I didn't get any emails after the end of it telling me about the devices. When AnandTech exposed Samsung for the second time about benchmark cheating, they completely clammed up. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to speak with us about responses. Or I remember, I think a couple of years after that, I had one meeting with a PR person, and that really didn't go well. And some of the language was used, and I just was never able to reconnect with that contact. So I've not spoken to Samsung in years. If anybody from Samsung is watching and you want to start talking again, then let's talk. Email's in the about page of the channel, so it's photography asks, did I do the predictions for this year? Yep. Yeah, there's a live stream with predictions. I think last year I got like 56% of my predictions. So photography also asks, do you know much about the AI inference engine on AMD's Phoenix Point and general XDNA architecture? I gave a client a rant about onboard AI accelerators in desktops a while ago. It's good, though it's going to be latent for a while, and the reason is I look back at how widely adopted AVX512 has been, and where we currently use machine learning in devices that we use every day. It's mostly on a smartphone, mostly on the camera. Aside from that, there are very limited use. Power management sort of things. On a smartphone, you can do it on the wireless radios. On a desktop, you really can't. So yeah, there's all that. It perhaps warrants a longer video. Dan asks, what do you think of MRAM and Everspin? So Everspin's been, I see their chips on systems every now and again, and it's always low capacity because it's built for a very specific use case. And it'll maintain that market. There are a lot of emerging memory technologies, and I was speaking to one of my clients who have a very strong NOR flash revenue, and I'm actually doing a video on this as well, so it's on the front of my mind. And the problem with a lot of these emerging memory technologies, for example, is that a lot of the use cases for emerging technologies are meant to be things like automotive and industrial. By automotive and industrial have very high temperature and retention requirements. And the new memories, while they are, quote, okay for consumer applications, they don't meet the requirements for embedded, for industrial or for automotive. So there's that to consider in all the mix. Excuse me. Dan asks, a replacement, is that a replacement for Optane? No. Right now there's no replacement for Optane. So it is what it is. Patrick asks, is 3D stacking interstacking different density substrates? It can be, or it can be the same stuff. As time goes on, the biggest problem with 3D stacking is more the thermals. And so thermals number one, power distribution number two, clock distribution number three. Okay, let's see. Lots of questions coming through. Thank you all for asking questions, of course. Ruben says he recently asked a vendor about the AMD offerings versus Intel. The answers he got indicated Intel is deeply embedded and hard to replace because of VM licensing. Yeah. Don't fix what isn't broken, basically. Lots of people are, well, we've been using Intel for ages, Intel still works, let's just keep using the same. And it's called the power of the incumbent. And it's reason why market shares, for example, in server have been slow to change for over 5 years. Because when people update, if you change your supplier, then you need to revalidate with that supplier. If you keep the supplier, then it's less entry of cost. The point you have to think about is the value in the competitive nature versus A versus B, or is it going to be in that sort of NRE cost? Does that in itself negate changing it or any updates, whether it's AMD to Intel, whether it's Intel to AMD, or whichever configuration? And GPU market's the same, so there is that. Oh, all coming through. Jirinath says, why doesn't AMD make a quad or hex core CPU? with the rest of the silicon being GPU. So yeah, I kind of had a little rant about this because it came up on PC World Stream. AMD doesn't do that most likely because they don't want to compete with the console market. They have two very important customers, Sony and Microsoft, who buy lots and lots of APUs in that market. And I'm pretty sure that their contracts probably stipulate that they can't create a combined APU SoC product in that market as part of those agreements, because you start treading on the footstep, start treading on the feet of the console players, they may suddenly lose that business. So IAR asks, will Google still be dependent on ARM reference designs in terms of CPU and GPU in the Tensor SoC? Will they eventually design their own CPU and GPU in the SoC? As far as I know, they're still ARM based. They've hired Google's high performance SoC team, or new generation. I can't remember exactly what the department's called, but they've hired a lot of really interesting CPU architects and a lot of ARM specialists in that space recently. So it is what it is. What are your thoughts on 3nm gate all around? It's coming. It's coming. Johan asks, do you think AVX512 will be re-enabled in Intel consumer CPUs? At some point, I think Intel has to swallow its pride and say, look, our dedicated AVX512 unit is taking up some transistor budget. So if we cut it and go down the AMD route of, doing double instructions, double microcode to get it through, they'll have to swallow some pride in doing that. And it depends where the transistor budget goes on future CPUs. I could see it being re-enabled, though I expect, knowing Intel internally, they may be loathed to swallow their pride on that one. So, do you think phone brands can do more AI things and features? The problem with doing edge AI is, especially with a smartphone, is that most smartphones always have connection. So if you can do the AI in the cloud, it's easier for the developer, because then the developer just has to do an interface. Doing AI on the device is always more difficult. And it's the trade-off, latency versus compute. And cameras have gotten really good at that. And as a result, that's why we have digital signal processors, image signal processors. We'll probably get video signal processors at some point. You just look at the new Qualcomm chips, and you just see it's full of these signal processors specifically designed to help processing images, then applying machine learning to images. For example, image segmentation in the live view as well. So, yeah. If you find another killer use case that they have to start spending silicon on, whether they can use the same or not, depends on the implementation. Holsky asks, have you seen Wendell's new video on Xeons? I haven't yet. It's been in my feed. I haven't had time to watch it yet, though I probably will. Christopher asks, when are we going to be able to upload our own tape outs to some fab and have them print off prototypes like we do with PCBs, if ever? So there are... So in academia, there's a big push to do it in academia, especially for grad students, if not undergraduates, what they call shuttles. So being able to essentially design and tape out a chip for a couple of $1,000s on these shuttles. Now it means that your chip goes on a shuttle on a multi-project wafer with a bunch of others. It comes back and it may or may not work, but I know people who have done this as part of their undergrad or grad, and there is a small push in that direction to allow it to be more universal, because the idea is that in future, especially America needs, or United States, America need more hardware engineers, more physical engineers in this space. And in order to do that, you need to essentially tempt them by being able to produce stuff in your undergrad or postgrad on leading edge process nodes. So it's easy to go get, say, a 300 nanometer or a 500 nanometer chip out, but what about a 45? What about a 32? What about a 16 nanometer? So there's a small push in that direction to increase the number and availability of these shuttles and reduce the price. So not upload yet, but yeah. Otto's asks, why does PCIe 5 seem to be so expensive with motherboards? That's because when you have higher bandwidth, you typically have a reduction in trace length and a lot stricter requirements regarding trace noise interference, which means that it has to be validated to a much higher spec, and that costs money. Phoenix asks, where the hell is HEDT gone? I need 40 PCIe lanes. Currently, server CPUs is the only way to go. I know how you feel. Zavid asks, how long have you been friends with the folks from PC World? You two get along pretty well. I mean, I've been seeing Gordon at events for years. I think it wasn't until I started the YouTube channel and started appearing on other people's channels as a guest that we actually, the thing is, when you're in written media, all written media is essentially, at loggerheads with each other. The YouTube community is very flexible in that way, so we don't see each other as competition. We see each other as complementary. And the fact that Gordon's been in the industry for so long, and I've been in the industry not as long, half as long, but long enough, means that we can play off of each other with that knowledge that we have. And the other people there, Adam, Elena, Brad, Mark, yeah, I've seen them around at events for ages. I'm actually thinking, have I ever met Elena in person? Was she there last time I was there? I can't remember. Yeah, so yeah, I would say it's getting late. It's getting 6:30, and I haven't had any caffeine today. Trying to have have I had any caffeine today? I had a green tea. Trying to do less caffeine, I guess, today. Am I aware of any UK universities participating in silicon shuttling programs? I don't think so. Not something I keep up to date with. Is Edinburgh's got the big supercomputing centre? Maybe them. If you're going around universities and asking, that's one good thing to ask. Do you participate in any chip shuttles? Because there are a couple of, but the fabs that we have in the UK are 180 nanometer or older, I think. So, Ruben asks, do you think we will see optical interconnects between components on main boards in the next decade? Yes, with any luck. Esky says I should stream on Twitch. Yeah. The thing is, I watch YouTube, I don't watch Twitch. The only Twitch streamers I watch are those that post on YouTube. I guess, I don't know. And Ruben asks, will you be at Dell World this spring in Las Vegas? I don't have any contacts at Dell. Dell's not a client, either on the analyst side or the influencer side. I don't speak with most of the OEMs these days like that, because I don't necessarily speak on the product level. I had this discussion with a mobile phone company the other day. It's like, I don't necessarily review phones. I review the chips in the phone. Like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. I've now got hold of a Dimensity 9000, 9000 Plus. I've got a ZTE phone which has Unisox only 7 nanometer SoC. I've just ordered a a is it Xiaomi who does the Poco phone, which is the only phone with a JLQ branded processor. Excuse me, content that's coming up on the channel, but yeah, it is what it is. And Otos asks, I read years ago about how Intel developed its own multi-chip glue active substrate. Is that what's being used in the new Sapphire Rapids? Yes, it's called EMIB, Embedded Multi-Die Interconnect Bridge. And yeah, there are 10 of them in the big Sapphire Rapids. There are 14 in the HBM Sapphire Rapids, and there are none in the medium Sapphire Rapids. Ruben, you have to get somebody to reach out to me. I think I know somebody in the office of the COO, I think, that I can contact to get an invite, maybe. Yeah, let me make a note of that. Dell World. I need to contact, I think it's David. And I'll see. I don't like going to Vegas though. I didn't go to CES this year because, again, the house build stuff, but also we had such a busy Q4. Yeah, the tech boy. I didn't see a 3D scanning question, maybe because I'm jumping. Do you know any offline 3D scanning applications in mobile? I've seen some industrial ones. I've not seen any mobile ones. So that was a lot of questions, and going for it over an hour and a half. Topic of the day, I did want to speak about the future of the business, of the channel. I've mentioned a few times now, I think hiring an editor, freelance ideally to begin with, is perhaps the priority, because there are just so many videos either in my head or part recorded or that need editing. I've actually got a project coming up, I mentioned earlier, that's like best described as a TV show. There's going to be 12 episodes. We've already filmed 6. It's going to be on the topic of AI hardware. I've got a fabulous co-host who's doing it, and we're going to be filming the next 6 episodes here in a couple of weeks. We've got a few sponsors. We still have sponsor spots, so if there are any AI companies out there who would like to sponsor an episode, please reach out. But that's fun. That's going to be coming soon. I should be finishing editing that soon, or at least the first episode. And it's going to be 12 short episodes of about 10 to 12 minutes each. Each episode is going to have a 30-minute podcast, and then that may also devolve into shorts, reels, TikToks. So if you hate shorts, I'm sorry, we're going to start doing some on the channel relating to that, but it's all going to be about AI chips, so you'll love it. But yeah, that's what's happening in the immediate future. I've still got some client videos to follow up on, and some couple of non-sponsor videos as well coming. So the TV show that I'm doing, that's purely a project from my own head. So we'll see how that goes. See how much you like TV episodic content, an episode a week, that sort of thing. Also in the future, I've discussed it a number of times, whether I should have a dedicated office space, whether that's as in a separate location for filming, testing, and editing. Now, the problem where I live in London is that if you want to rent an office and for it to be suitable for filming, you're looking at least twice the amount per square foot than my mortgage is right now. So there's no desire to essentially find somewhere else to rent in order to do that, because ideally I'd also want somewhere where I can put a server rack. Now, for this TV show that I'm filming, we are renting a studio for it, and it's costing about $1,000 a day with a videographer there to monitor audio and video, so it actually is recorded properly. And I'm thinking, yeah, if I'm going to be spending $2-3 a month on somewhere to film, then I need to start using that recording studio 2 to 3 times a month before I start looking at my own space. Because at least in their space, they have like Sony A6400s, to use. So they also have all the equipment. If I go rent out my own space or buy my own space, I also need to buy all the equipment for it. So there is that to consider. So still not sure if a dedicated office is right where I need to be. On the client side, I do have some clients that are underutilizing me, so there is some room to accept more clients there. So I'm going to see if I can expand my range to more clients. Also, if they want content, produce lots of varied content on the channel. And travel, yeah. So Q1 is going to be quite light for travel for me. Want to do Computex. There's also LTX. We've got Hot Chips, and maybe at International Supercomputing. And there's a few of client events. I'm presenting at DAX, Semicon West. Yeah, so it's going to start picking up again, obviously. So yeah, and that's kind of why I have envisioned for the future. Not necessarily more of the same. But bigger, better, badder, more focused. Yeah, because Q4 was so busy and Q1's been so disruptive. I really would like to start Q2 off with a good bounce. Try and get stuff regularly out on the channel. Try and get stuff regularly out on the newsletter as well. Updates to the merch store, updates to the Patreon, updates to the Discord as well. All these sorts of things I'm trying to do manually. People are still surprised when I tell them that every video I've ever put out is still I'm the one that's edited it. I haven't had any extra help for any of my editing yet, so there is that. It's yeah, so I'm looking forward to the next 12 months, especially if things over the next 12 months happen exactly the same as the last 12 months. That's great. Happy, very self-sustaining, more than. It has been more lucrative than I imagined, but it's also been more fun, and I've reinvested a good amount into parts of this. So being able to go and attend conferences on my own dime has been quite important as well. Because that was a worry going in. Will if I wanted to go to a conference and there was nobody willing to sponsor me, would I be able to afford it to go on my own? And the answer's been yes so far. So as that continues, that's great. That's great. So I hope you've all enjoyed this whole past year. And I guess to finish up, we'll have some Q&A, and I'll check the Discord in a second as well. Michael asks, do you think AMD will respond to Intel's new workstation lineup with more affordable Threadrippers? And will AMD finally have an equivalent for Intel's QuickSync for video decoding? So, again, regarding Threadripper, and I've seen a number of videos on this. Oh, AMD lied to us. AMD said Threadripper is going to be a long-lived program. Really disappointed that they've ditched Threadripper. Now it's only Threadripper Pro. And to be honest, even the Threadripper Pro clients, buyers, are saying we can't get enough of them. SIs that I speak to say they can't keep Threadripper in stock, especially the big 64 cores. Now, so for those of you who don't know, Threadripper was like a skunkworks project inside AMD, done by a few individuals who thought this is a good idea. It eventually got the green. It got the green light, and it came out, and it was very well received. And it's my understanding that from that initial skunkworks team, nobody's left. I mean, nobody is still at AMD. Everybody has left since. And that's kind of why it's half died the way it has, or it's pro only at this point. Go back to my points also, it's a small market, and if you've got nobody inside the company that's heavily pushing it or literally dedicated for that role. So I remember ages ago, AMD was looking for essentially, because it was a job that I thought, that might be interesting for me, essentially head of workstation product. This was 2 years ago now. And either they haven't had the right person, they haven't had somebody with the right passion, or it's just been decided it's not a route they want to go down, or because they're using the same silicon as their enterprise CPUs, their Epics, is saying it's much cheaper for us to build one big ecosystem over here and make money off that than to build two ecosystems, one of which is 99% of our business and the other one which is 1%. So there is all that to take into account. So it's not so much AMD lied to people, it's just the people who made those promises no longer work there. And I feel like that's something to do with the. In order to drive a product to market, you have to have a dedicated team internally in order to do that. And if you don't have a team, then that product isn't coming to market. So that's my perspective on it anyway. I may be wrong. But I mean, if AMD wants to relive down that route, they have that. It's going to be a very careful marketing message because of those initial promises. Now, part of it is part of the people of that team were known for making big promises. And I'm still friends with a couple of them. Photography. Oh, thank you, Gustagama. That's really nice. Photography asks, what are your thoughts on Intel's short-term issues? Doesn't it look their tiles are going to do so well if Meteor Lake is cancelled for desktop? Yeah, I have thoughts about Intel's tiling that may. I've said I'll create a video about it at some point. I still want to. Phoenix asks, I love your outdoor streams. There's only you who walks outdoor and speaks about upcoming crucial tech. Well, that's at a cat sanctuary, right? You just have to. Let's see, let's just jump. Simon asks, has the situation with the gas supply, Xenon and Krypton improved over the past few months? The thing is, it was kind of a half non-story to begin with, because most fabs had a scare a few years ago about this anyway. And so most of them stocked up with at least 1 or 2 years worth of supply, because it was cheap enough at the time and cheap enough to store that they could just buy tons of supply. So I haven't seen it being an issue yet, either supply or inventory. So yeah. Cyrus asks, do you foresee AMD/Intel moving away from x86, giving Apple and Qualcomm advances? No, I don't. x86 is a cash cow. I mean, how many different markets has Intel tried to move into to become a market leader, and yet their biggest moneymaker is still x86, still consumer x86. So bear that in mind. Maybe you can rent a barrack at Bletchley Park. That would be cool. So I do have family in Bletchley, actually, and I have thought about going there and doing a video. But it's kind of like the Computer History Museum in San Francisco, which I've been to twice recently. Yeah, it's people like to think about the retro stuff and the old stuff, but it doesn't generate traffic, and you have to develop it in a story in a way. And when you're a channel known for talking about leading edge stuff, you suddenly talk about the old stuff and it doesn't get as much. I mean, you can even see it on Linus's channel or even Wendell's channel. Whenever they start talking about something that's vintage or old, it gets next to zero traffic. I mean, I haven't seen the latest one where they talk about the 1.8, the thumbnail had the 1.8 inch hard disk drives that went into the iPod, or the one that you can actually now get as a watch now. Haven't seen how well that's doing, but yeah. Phoenix asks, you do a job that can drive you crazy and mad and beyond. So far, what keeps your sanity in check? Learning how to say no. No, can't do that briefing. No, I'm too busy. No, I can't do that. Would be interested, but I've got paid work to do, that sort of thing. Yeah, learn to say no. don't get pigeonholed either. So as I become an analyst, and I'm doing more about quantum, I'm doing more about AI, I'm doing more about FPGA, and it's always stuff that I wanted to look into, but I never got the opportunity. But as a result, some of my perhaps CPU and GPU focus hasn't been that strong. So there is that. Zevos asks, do you think ARM should make their Cortex A500 series cores out of order, like how Apple's efficiency / those cores are out of order? The thing is, the A5, say the A510s, for those of you not familiar with ARM's smaller cores, you have the Cortex X series, which are like their semi-custom high performance. Then you have the A700 series, which is their mid-range. Then A500 series, which is their low end. If I remember correctly, you can fit 4 of those A510s into one A715. And if they were to go to out of order, you wouldn't get that 4-to-1. So there's that to think of. So and those A510s are also used in systems where die size is everything, not performance. And those cores go into a lot more other. Apple's cores only go into Apple's products. ARM has to think about cores that go into embedded and industrial and automotive and all that, whereas Apple doesn't. So there is that. Are you going to talk about rumors from Moore's Law is dead? No. Let's put it that way. Patrick asks, isn't HBM the answer to AMD and Apple's current offerings for on-package memory? Will Intel come to this conclusion? If so, how long will they take to come around? So Intel's already doing server CPUs with HBM. AMD hasn't done a server CPU with HBM, though MI300 will. And Apple doesn't do HBM, it just does unpackaged DDR5. So there is that. Oh, Jeff's here. Hi, Jeff. Everybody say hi to Jeff Geerling and give him a like and subscribe. You should. Akalesh says, planning on switching to VLSI from embedded. There's always going to be a demand for VLSI. Carlos asks, do you think this ChatGPT era will impact much into CPU architecture design? Already is. It's already being used. Perhaps not as extensively as you might think, but it's already being used. Thoughts on Samsung's 3nm gate-all-around? Well, they did the gate-all-around early, internal use case test. Then I'll have gate-all-around, is it GAP performance? It's still to come out. They were very early in talking about it, and perhaps they were... I spoke to an engineer, I won't mention which company, and I said, what's the hardest part of the gate-all-around stuff? And she just said everything. Not so much things like backside power delivery and supermim capacitors and all that stuff. The hardest part of gate all around is the transistor. So when is the TENS torrent video scheduled? I'm hoping to send them a draft. So 2 videos coming out, 1 interview with Jim, 1 a focus on RISC-V high performance. I should be sending the draft to them tomorrow, hopefully. So Bob says, how important is chip design and architecture compared to manufacturing process? Can you still gain a lot of performance on one chip through, or does performance mainly come from node tech? So the thing is, architecture can be physical architecture or logical architecture. And the next step, especially as we go into 3D stacking and chiplets, is going to be physical architecture. Things like where do you put the TSVs, where do you put the power vias, or the vias that do power, where do you put the cooling, that sort of thing. So physical architecture is going to become just as important as well on that. So Jeff says you have to find a way to incorporate something in a museum into a video about a new thing. Yeah. Again, but it's like so you did the history of or machine learning, or can you run spec on a Cray supercomputer, that sort of thing. So Photography asks, has Qualcomm settled with ARM yet? No. It'll probably take a couple of years. Best case scenario is they settle out of court. Zavid asks, how did you come up with the idea of potato for your channel name? It came about because I did a video with Wendell at the, was it the Zen 5000 mobile series CPUs maybe launch. It was right next to E3. Last time I was in LA, we were at the top floor of a hotel, Hollywood sign in the background, although too far away that you could actually see it. We filmed, and then this is at a time where I was thinking about whether I should do a channel, and in the YouTube closed captions, it introduced me as Ian from TechTechPotato, and I went, that. I have a picture of it somewhere. So Jimmy asks, do you think AMD should increase core count with Zen 5? They'll increase core count at some point, of course. The question is more if there's going to be if they're going to do a scaled down version of the core like Zen 4C, but for consumers. So can you run Doom on a Cray 1? Probably not. Zevos, regarding a Cortex A600 series, that probably makes sense. However, do realize where ARM is right now. ARM is currently contracting, reducing headcount because SoftBank is reducing its investment and reducing its R&D. So there is that. I can't get a word. I can't tell if ARM's AI IP, the Ethos series, is dead or not. The web pages are still online, but nobody's using it, and everybody who was using it is now using something else. And the word is on the street is ARM's not supporting it fully, not providing a roadmap, because they've now got so many projects with all the investment, and now the investment is reducing. They're having to cut down the number of projects. So it's unlikely there to be a new line of Cortex CPUs. And Bob asks again about AI, machine learning, and chip design and analysis. Yeah, it's going to be used top down. So chip design has like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 discrete layers of order operations. You got materials, and then you do design gates, then you design circuits and libraries and macros and whatever. An AI machine learning algorithm can work within one of those and do optimizations. Floor planning is usually where we think about it, but it could work further down the stack as well. The issue is when an algorithm learns to jump the stack. Once you jump the stack, you then get into this issue of cross-compatibility. The whole point about having a tiered, separated stack like this is that you can improve one segment and all the other segments can be the same, but overall the product is improved. If you start jumping and crossing several layers of the stack with an improvement, you suddenly tie all those layers together for future improvements. So that's going to be the issue. I've said this to the CEO of Synopsys. I think I've even said it to Jim at some point. Is if you break those layers, do you get to a point where the chips become non-understandable to humans. And I think Jim in the recent interview said we're already there. So there is that to consider. I have to check the interview. I need to, yeah, keep referencing it. So I better put it out there at some point. So, yeah, quantum in verification when, yeah, keep dreaming, keep dreaming. Do you think RISC-V architecture will dominate any commercial space, for example, networking or even the server space? When the high performance cores come, it's then going to be a software adaptation. You know, you've already got RISC-V cores in a lot of places, like hardware, hard disk drive controllers, that sort of thing. So under NDA, but if you could have a no holds barred access to anything and everything, which company would you choose? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough one. Because the sort of things I would want to know about NDA wouldn't be product related, I don't think. It would be how people think, or how, you know, I'd love to understand how, what's the method by which a project at Intel gets greenlit or approved, or how does the naming come about for like Xeon Scalable, or yeah, things like that. It's part of my issue is, in order to give a more detailed, in-depth view case of these companies, excuse me, is I want to learn how they think. And all of that, even as an analyst to a certain degree, is under NDA, but not even but not even under NDA. It's just not even discussed. Partly because even the people who I speak to might not know how something like that is done. So what I would really love to learn in certain cases is just the procedure of certain things. I mean, I've asked massive big companies, can I actually get, you know, a breakdown, like an org chart of who reports to who? And they're like, no. It's like, well, you list these segments in your financials, but there are at least 10 other segments you're not mentioning. And they're like, so? It's that sort of thing. So, or maybe I'm just weird like that. I think it makes for better content the more I know about a company. I know that there are some people who have stated that that's not their goal because companies lie to them. They don't want to learn about companies because on the off chance they get lied to, and therefore they don't want to learn more about the company and they want to keep that outside perspective. I'm like, yeah, but that limits your top line to exactly how much can you go talk about. If you see certain results, you're going to ask a ton of questions where if you actually knew how things worked internally, you could answer a bunch of them in advance rather than sputter and get angry about something that you could have learned about if you had gone and, you know, participated in those conversations that were even offered, for example. So yeah. Bob, think of high NA as, instead of doing dual patterning with regular EUV, you can just do one with high NA. The problem is, okay, you get a machine, but how long does that machine take to install? What is the throughput of that machine? And is it going to be used in development or production? Right? You can't just buy one machine and expect it to be that. For a company the size of Intel, you need 10, you need 15 machines. Everybody who's getting them, because I think there's like 5 or 6 on the order books now, and all the big companies are getting one, and Intel's getting a dev one first as well, I think. So they're all going to be in development. They're not going to be in production. It's not until ASML starts shipping out 2, 3, 4 a quarter that you're actually going to start seeing it being pushed into production. Because I know when I've spoken to Intel about this, when I've spoken to Anne Kelleher or others, they've said we are the nodes that we've highlighted as implementing high-NA EUV, if high-NA isn't ready by that point, we're also doing the work to enable it on regular EUV as well. So it's not going to be a delay if high-NA is ready. So that's sort of thing. So yeah. Do you think NVIDIA's networking stuff will ever see use in standalone workstations? It already is, Ruben. The Intel workstation announcement, NVIDIA also had a co-announcement saying that they're working with Dell and HP such that you can buy workstations with Mellanox ConnectX and RTX 6000 Ada and Sapphire Rapids workstation. So it's already there. And I keep saying Jiranath asks, what are your thoughts on Xiaomi and Chinese companies producing flagship phones only on paper, but the software is crap? Do you think they will improve in future? They will only improve as much as they find the right intersection between R&D costs, approval, and revenue, right? If they can put in more effort to get better software and it's going to improve revenue 10%, then yeah, they will. If it's not going to improve revenue at all and they're not going to lose, then no, they won't improve anything. So yeah. Zivos, this is a good question. Hardware engineers are paid less than software engineers. Do you think this will change anytime soon in future? So speaking, yeah, there have been several presentations on this. I think it's Professor Wang at Stanford, who used to be at TSMC, who was saying how the US is full of software engineers and very few hardware engineers comparatively. You go to China and Taiwan, or especially Taiwan, there are more hardware engineers than software engineers. You go to Korea, there are more hardware engineers than software engineers, because that's where the manufacturing is. And part of it is because the US isn't the hub of manufacturing it used to be. It's allowed software companies, now don't get me wrong, if you look at software companies in Taiwan, there's nothing. If you go to software companies in Korea, there's a few. But it's allowed the USA to have a strong software presence. And as a result, they're not getting people coming up through the hardware engineering ranks on the hardware side of chip production. And the discussions were, well, how do you encourage more people to do, hard EE rather than CS, electrical engineering rather than computer science? And it's a hard sell when you can turn around and say, well, if you get a great job as a CS, you could be earning twice as much than a hardware engineer. And people are going to say, well, of course I'm going to do software instead. And that's not going to change for a long time. So, do I think quantum computers will ever be practically useful? Yes, they are already. Will the CHIPS Act bring manufacturing back home? No, but it will help as long as... the thing is, I can see it going very political already. So... photography asks, is AMD still wafer constrained? Officially, as of the last financial call, they are no longer wafer constrained. They're more personnel constrained, I think. I think AMD's latest employee numbers were 15,500 or so, and a big part of that is the Xilinx acquisition. That was another 2,000 or so. They're still hiring, just not at the same pace. Jiranath asks, uses of 5G to a common consumer. Most people, 4G is okay. Yes, I agree. However, take, for example, in the last week, I was at an event with Oppo, right next to the O2 Arena. Big event, lots of people. 5G is the only technology that has capacity to hold that many hosts in that dense an area. And initially, a lot of 5G installs was just carrying off of 4G hardware. We're now getting 5G standalone hardware, so it needs the 5G specific base stations to work, but it means it can run without a 4G backbone. So 5G, whether you're talking about sub-6 or millimeter wave, yeah, it definitely has prevalence when you're in those sort of high density scenarios. It's more for cities and big towns than it is everywhere else. So there is that. Electronic engineering, not electrical engineering, yeah. EE or triple E or what have you. With the crypto pandemic ending, do you think Intel will discard postpone construction of new silicon factories in the USA? So they've already said Ohio will be half funded by BlackRock. Don't know about the profit sharing agreement there. Arguments suggesting Magdeburg is delayed because they want more money from the government. It's so in Intel's production. They committed a lot of money, and some of that money won't come to fruition. Some of those plans won't come to fruition because they are cutting back and they are looking to reduce capex, and the dividends are still high. I think capex was meant to be 36 billion for this year, but now it looks like it will be more like 32. So you got to cut some things. Part of that is R&D on Tofino, and yeah, other things will come by the wayside as well at some point as well on that. Patrick asks, how do CPU manufacturers plan to sell more advanced multi-core CPUs when legacy games poorly utilize them due to the investment gap in multi-core enhancement for games? So part of that is engine driven, but also you already know that when companies launch new CPUs, new consumer CPUs, on the gaming side, it's all about single-threaded, really. There's still that focus. As long as you have enough threads, single-threaded peak is what matters. And then when it comes to multi-threaded, let's just throw a Blender, let's throw a Threadripper, let's throw an AI workload at it, and there we go. So that the marketing has already done that. Zevos asks, what are your thoughts about the new Geekbench 6? I've been playing with it a little bit. The guys over at Geekbench, I forget the company name now, but we had a couple of calls before it, or had a call before it came out, late last year, and the workloads are a lot more relevant to modern day. There's perhaps a few too many machine learning. I think my biggest gripe is the tests are too short. As with most Geekbenches over the years, it's 20 tests, and each test, 20 tests for single thread, and each test is, 2.5, 3, 4 seconds, which is about enough time for turbo to kick in, then come down, then kick in and come down, then kick in and come down, which, offers a distorted view. I think workloads need to be longer. I kind of prefer PC Mark in that regard for length of test. I don't mind a test being 20 minutes because I automate it and then just run it. So there is that. Photography asks, do you think the West is creating a massive problem in Taiwan by trying to ban China from TSMC and ASML? It's not creating a problem yet, though China invading Taiwan will be the most difficult invasion in history, and there are lots of people who have discussed it, much more smarter than I. So, and going for more than 2 hours at this point, but Guido does ask, how's your chip collection coming along? Any new interesting finds? So earlier in the stream, I mentioned I have Unisox, only 7nm SoC in a smartphone, in a ZT smartphone. I've been testing that. I really should do content on it. I've got a JLQ processor in a smartphone coming out. I've ordered it, and that seems to be a Qualcomm joint venture in China to perhaps get around some restrictions. I don't know. So I still need to do some research on that. Behind me, you can see I've got Genoa and Sapphire Rapids. Genoa, Sapphire Rapids in Lucite. Nice, and then obviously this, which has been up front and center, which is Cerebrus's wafer scale chip. Though I must admit, this is not a chip. So this here is basically a display. It's an image on top of a metal thing that you can stick to the wall. This from Cerebrus is the same thing. I've been telling Andrew, and I think I've told Andrew at least once, and I think I told some of the previous PR team. I can't remember if I said it to Rebecca, and I said, look, you need to have essentially wafers like that you can hand out. But obviously, you're not going to do a whole one, but and I so when I was in San Francisco a few weeks ago, I got an email from their PR manager, Kim, who said, we've got some news to share with you. Do you have time for a call with Andrew, the CEO? And I turned around and said, I'm in town. Are you free Thursday? I can come down to the office before my flight. And they were like, sure. And so, yeah, I've been to the office a few times now. Got to speak with Andrew. I had a chance to take a good amount of photos and B-roll while I was there because I didn't manage to last time. Rebecca showed me around, and then she presented me with one of these, and I'm like, yes, finally. I mean, I've done it with a real Cerebrus wafer, but this means that they can hand these out to influencers, to creators, to have in their backgrounds, and it's just going to look amazing. It's not a real one, but it's something. It's something. So, yeah, good new chip. Bob, regarding Gerard Williams leaving Apple, also one of the lead architects at Apple is now at TensorTorrent. You're probably going to have to wait till M2 or M3 to see the results of them leaving. Do you think Intel is going to revive Pathfinder? Asked Crispy. No, not yet. Christopher asks, can you do a chip collection tour video at some point? Would be so cool. Only if you really want to have a look at 80 different versions of Haswell. I don't have mine in a nice presentation case like the guys at CPU Galaxy or whatever. Mine are all kind of stacked. I would like to be able to put them in a presentation case and perhaps even remember half the ones that I've purchased. So, yeah. Zevos, regarding Geekbench 5 versus Geekbench 6, you can't compare the scores between each other. So the Geekbench 5 and Geekbench 6 use different systems as their baseline. So Mayank asks about Moore's law ever ending when we reach 2 angstrom node length. So 2 angstroms isn't a length, just again to reiterate that. And yes, there will be an end because there are only 3 dimensions. Photography asks, is Tesla Dojo similar to Cerebrus chips in idea anyway? Kinda, yes. I've got 2 videos on that on the channel. Best watch those. And with that, I think we're coming up to 2 hours, 20 minutes. I'm perhaps put a stop there. You guys are asking a lot of really interesting questions. Got me really thinking. Yeah, I wanted to do this live stream because it's a year since I left AnandTech, and it's a year since I've been doing this whole more than more thing, really. And addition to the channel content, more sponsored content, but hopefully more enjoyable and getting to see and do things that I don't think I would have done otherwise under the AnandTech banner. It's really exciting. I've got some new projects coming up. Stay tuned for the Keller interview. Stay tuned for my TV series that's coming. That's also really exciting. And yeah, looking for more clients. if you're interested in the merch, then merch.techtechpotato.com, and there's currently an offer with the code MOREPOTATO, MOREPOTATO, all caps, no spaces. You can get 25% off the Cerebrus wafer scale versions of this mug. So we've got a new temporary logo with it where it's just a square with a bite taken out of it, because it's a wafer scale bites. I need to order some of them myself because I literally put them on the store today. So if you like what you see, like and subscribe. I have a Patreon. I have a Substack. There's just so many ways that I'm speaking into the void, shouting into the void. So when I say TV show, I mean episodic content for YouTube, but everyone understands TV show. It's 12 episodes, 12 podcasts. We've filmed 6, got 6 more to film, and got a lot of editing to do. And all about AI hardware. And if you like it, there'll be another edition next year as well. So, yeah, more about the TV show. I have to do some rewind. I've spoken a little bit about it already, but I do want it to kind of come onto the channel and for people to get it as well. So I'm looking forward to it. If you've got ideas for content, obviously stick them in the comments below. Questions. I did say I would get to a question in the Discord actually. Is it possible to produce only cores on a wafer with fancy packaging techniques on silicon with cache? Eventually in future, you might be able to put cache on a separate die. Yes, that depends on 3D stacking. But yeah, with that, I will say thank you, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. And yeah, killer interview. Stay tuned.